just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We're restarting this series. We've had a few months that we were absent from our virtual Day in the Life series. We are very fortunate today. First of all, my name is Lonnie Emard, and I'm the Apprenticeship Director for the Arkansas Center for Data Sciences. As you know, our team and our organization's mission is around the IT talent pool for the state of Arkansas, matching up the demands for employers around the state with capable and upcoming talent in the IT profession. We facilitate that through apprenticeship programs. Since one of our apprenticeship programs is an RPA Developer apprenticeship, we're excited to host the event today and see what an average day in the life of an RPA developer is like. And I hope that's going to be really interesting to a lot of our potential candidates that are out there, either live here today or that will see this via our webinar podcasts. Today features Chris Robertson, RPA developer at Arvest Bank. We're very excited to have Chris kind of here to share his experience. Part of this is going to be giving you some details of the day in the life, and part of it's going to be Chris's story. And we think that's pretty impactful as well, because everybody joining the IT profession kind of comes from some different type story, right? We're looking at both traditional candidates that might have pursued a computer science degree, and then non-traditional candidates where that's not the case. And because of that, we've been very, very successful in the state of Arkansas, meeting the needs of employers. So let's spend no more time, but let's get started. Thank you, Chris, for being here with us today. We want to start by letting you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your story and your background, and then we'll lead into some of these questions. And as Lisa spoke, if you're on the line and you have a question yourself, why put it in the chat and we'll address that at the end. So Chris, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Lonnie. So my background professionally is I worked in retail for a really long time, about 7 years through and after college, but knew I wanted to get into kind of a technology role, and but wasn't sure in what capacity or even how to do that. So I did manage to weasel my way into an entry-level position at the Arvest help desk, where I learned a lot just about technology in general. And then this apprenticeship opportunity opened itself up, sponsored by Arkansas Center for Data Sciences, State of Arkansas, and Arvest, and gave me an incredible opportunity to learn about being an RPA developer. So I spent about a year doing that in the apprenticeship, doing classroom training, on-the-job training, but eventually graduated. Now I'm just a full-blown RPA developer for Arvest.
Well, that's just tremendous, Chris. And you can tell us more about even prior to, like you said, that first retail opportunity. But the thing I think most people want to hear you talk about is, first of all, why don't you go ahead and define RPA for people, right? And tell us a little bit about what that's meant for you and what it means in the profession.
Yeah, absolutely. So RPA stands for Robotics Process Automation. And as a developer, I'm developing those automations. And so this isn't a physical robot like you might see building a car, or like the Boston Dynamics robots that are doing flips. Not quite that cool, but it's still really cool. This is a software robot, so ones that interact with applications online or desktop applications that basically mimic what a human would do in some sort of business process. So a lot of times when you're looking at automation opportunities, the way I typically look at it is the parts of my jobs in the past that I've hated, where I'm just like clicking the same thing over and over and over again. And it's the same process every time. That's what robotics process automation does. It's automate those processes.
That's very, very clear definition. I hope that helps everybody out there. And that is a term that's become more and more prominent, through the years. And you mentioned automation. You're in the banking sector, right?
Yep.
So without maybe giving away trade secrets, I mean, what are some of the things that you encounter where your skills now have allowed you to, one, develop this automation? What does that mean in terms of day-to-day kind of function?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the cool parts about being an RPA developer is I get to interact with a lot of different areas of the business. So one day I might be working with the fraud team on improving their processes, and another day might be working with the mortgage team and automating certain portions of those processes. So it's really exciting and cool to get to interact with different areas of the business. But a lot of times we have kind of a second part of our team that brings us these opportunities, these automations, and say, hey, here's a part where, or a process where they're doing the same thing over and over again. And someone's just sitting there clicking the same buttons or typing in the same things every time. They bring those to us, and then we sit down and with the software that we use and automate those processes. If that answers your question, let me know if I need to expand.
It not only answers it, Chris, but obviously it tees up another set of questions, right? And so, what are some of the skills and attributes that you think you brought to this that may be why Mike and his team, interviewed and hired you to do this? What are some of those things that kind of position you to do this well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would divide it, classically into your soft and hard skills. So I think the soft skills a lot of times in technology gets overlooked. So how empathetic you are as a person, being able to work with teammates, kind of your interpersonal traits, but also traits that would be useful in any role that you're in, not just a technical role. So critical thinking and problem solving. How do you, when you're faced with a problem, how do you come to a solution, and how do you figure that out if you don't know the answer already? So those are some soft skills that are really good and useful. In terms of hard skills, what's good to be more appealing in a role like this? Knowledge of computer basics may be obvious, but just having that baseline knowledge of how to work with a computer, some basic computer functionality is really useful, as well as some computer science basics. There's a lot of good places you can learn about this online, but knowing kind of the zeros and ones of how computers work and how they process information is really, really beneficial.
Now, had you done any coding before you entered this role, and what level of coding have you done? What platform are you in? Software and so forth.
Yeah, a little bit. I had taken some online classes kind of in my own time, but never in an official capacity. And something I was going to mention as well is in terms of hard skills is already being ingrained in certain areas of the business is also really beneficial. You may know this particular area of the business better than anyone else. If you transition to a role like this one as a developer, you're going to know how to automate those processes better than anyone else as well. So that's something else I would throw in there, that your current job can provide value in this role as well.
Mm-hmm. So as far as either writing code or now maintaining, is there any cool terminology that's used in RPA? I think I know of one, but I may let you throw it out there. But
yeah, there's a lot of different areas, and a cool thing about it is that you can use the tool as it's set up, which is a low, what they call like a low code environment. So it's basically dragging and dropping what we call activities. It's you drag what they call a click activity, and you specify what you want it to click on. And it's really easy and simple to set something like that up. But as you get deeper into it, you could start using your more traditional kind of programming concepts and skills to do things a lot of times in a more efficient way. So we have automations that use PowerShell, Python, and some other things like that, and even some traditional web development. And then probably, I don't know if this is the one you're referring to, but there's an acronym called OCR, which is optical character recognition, which is an engine that this tool has. UiPath is the tool that we use that can look at a scanned document that doesn't have text that you can like copy paste, and it can read that and give you that text. And so there's some really cool automation opportunities with technology like that as well.
So you mentioned a couple areas where your day-to-day activity, you mentioned fraud and mortgage and so forth, but how would you kind of describe how you see the impact of this, RPA, this automation, to the larger scale business of Arvest? I mean, have you made that connection in terms of this is the business value and that kind of thing? Describe that for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. When we're analyzing automation opportunities, part of it is kind of how much is this automation worth? How much do we need to pay someone to do this same job versus if we automate it? And that's not to say we're replacing people, we're just enabling them to do more human specific tasks. Um, so a lot of those have a price tag kind of associated with them. But also even beyond that, you get a lot of kind of business opportunities that are opened up. So a really cool example is during COVID, when you weren't able to go into a bank branch. And if you wanted to open an account, you had to sit in a drive-through, and it may have taken a long time, and you're just sitting there in your car, or even pre-COVID, just sitting in the bank probably isn't the best experience always. But one of our automations helped enable the creation of bank accounts online. So you didn't have to go to a branch. You could just go to the Arvest website and open an account, and our automation took over portions of that. So that was a really cool business opportunity that RPA opened up that wasn't there previously.
Yeah, Chris, we heard that a lot, that technology, was always able to do certain things, but until there's a crisis like COVID, sometimes it wasn't always fully taken advantage of. And this clearly was a great opportunity. The word earlier I was looking for is, do you use the term bots? Yeah, OCR was another one. But knowing that we have a lot of acronyms, I think people, when you said how cool things seem, there's just something about that word that says, hey, I created a bot, or here's what that bot's doing. So tell us a little more. Do you use that terminology there?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, all of our automations turn into bots. So it's, like I said earlier, it's literally mimicking what the human is doing on the computer in a lot of cases. So we have a user, the bot, that will literally log into the computer and do all the clickings and everything. It's all via software, but we have, I don't know how many different machines now. I think we're up to 40 different what you call virtual machines that bots are logging into and doing certain business tasks.
It is really cool. And it leads me to the next question, and that is, not only for you, but what advice would you give? We've got this audience of potential, future talent coming into various IT occupations, but for this one, what advice would you give somebody who's kind of first looking and saying, would they enjoy this, or, just anything that you might offer to a young up and coming candidate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're interested in IT at all, especially if you're kind of on the outside looking in, you're not currently in that field, this is a great entry, kind of at first entry level position, where it kind of bridges the gap between knowing nothing and getting trained up like with an apprenticeship, and getting to the point where you have a lot of technical skills where you could go be a software engineer. So it's a great opportunity just in that sense. It's hard to answer it correctly because it's so interesting to me. It's hard to imagine it not being interesting. So I think a lot of times though, if you're ever in that position where you're sitting there clicking the same buttons you click every day over and over again, and I used to call it the hate my job process. It's like, I hate my job, I hate my job. If you ever find yourself in that kind of position, this role does away with that. It gets rid of stuff like that. And if that sounds exciting to you, this would be a perfect spot.
What a great description, because I know there's a lot of folks, and no matter what walk of life they're in, they're probably singing that little jingle that you just gave us.
Yep.
Kind of the other aspect of this from a career perspective, you kind of already hit on it, and that is, you mentioned a UiPath as kind of a platform and some of the software you use, but you also mentioned, some other programming languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Potentially.
Yep.
Is that part of the way this was described to you, is that you were beginning a career path that had some next steps to it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was, even if, it was obvious from the beginning that this is a great way to, like, at the very minimum, get your toes wet. And as fast as RPA is growing, it's easily a long career that's pretty bulletproof in terms of the career going away anytime soon. So yeah, it's a great way to slowly expose yourself to those more kind of complicated technologies that may be hard to grasp at first. But this is a great way to kind of introduce yourself into that.
You mentioned your team. Did you start with a cohort of folks in your team? And then I guess one of the questions that I was going to ask you was, do you see a shortage of people coming into the occupation? Maybe that's more of a big picture question, but even for Arvest and what you see going on there, how has that looked when you started, and what does it look like in the future at Arvest?
Yeah, so I think when I joined the team, we had 3 developers already on the team, and then there was a group of 4 of us that were apprentices. So that was our cohort. We kind of learned alongside each other for several months, and then actually I say for several months, we're continuing to learn alongside each other. But and then the 9 months of on-the-job training, it was kind of right there with each other the whole way. But now we're a part of that bigger team as soon as we were done with the classroom portion. So those more seasoned RPA developers were right alongside them too. Yeah. I guess to answer your question, where it's kind of going, we have another cohort coming in. I think we're up to like 10 apprentices for the new class. So we have another group of 10 that's about to join us that we're very excited about.
That's great news, I'm sure, for the bank, because if you said a lot of this is based on efficiencies and cost benefit or whatever, why, that sounds pretty meaningful in the big picture. Maybe we need to interview Mike and some of your other folks that you work very closely with.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I'm trying to think about Scarlett and your whole team that we've met. Before we open it up for any just general questions from the chat that Lisa may have been gathering for us, any other thoughts that came through your mind as you were preparing to go through the interview that you wanted to make sure that you shared? Because I may have missed something that would be very important.
Yeah, I may have covered it a little bit already, but I would say, honestly, the apprenticeship program that y'all have going on, not just in RPA, but in other technology positions, is an insanely incredible opportunity if you're interested in getting into technology roles. So look out for apprenticeships. Getting your foot in the door into kind of an entry-level IT position is really beneficial to get a lot of those baseline competencies that are really useful and make you appealing in roles like this. And then there's lots of, an overwhelming amount of training online that's free, even outside of kind of on the job stuff or classrooms. So UiPath, I can send these links in the chat if y'all want, but UiPath, the tool that we use, all of their training is free online. Everything from the lowest level, hey, click on this button, to processing invoices and using that OCR term I used earlier. So all of that you can learn on their website for free and is really cool. So I would definitely recommend checking that out.
That's great. So Lisa, I'm checking the chat. I don't see any questions necessarily, but we've got a number of folks that I'm not familiar with that are on the line and on the call here. So if there is anybody who has a question they'd like to forward along to Chris, this is the time. We've got our expert apprentice here giving us great insights. And if we don't get too many more questions, Chris, then just know that this is being captured. So for the ones that aren't here online, we'll have this readily available as part of our webinar podcast series. So your day lives in infamy.
All right, awesome.
Lonnie, we do have a question from Mr. Bill Yoder. He would like to know an example of a banking process automated with RPA.
Did you capture that, Chris?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry. So one I'm currently or about to start working on, which is really exciting, is reversing overdraft fees in the case of like a fraudulent transaction. So say you only have $5 in your account, and then some app randomly charged you $10 for a purchase you didn't make, whatever, and then you overdraft. So those fees, or those non-sufficient fund fees that you would typically get, obviously that's not really fair. You didn't make that purchase, so the bot will go in there, detect those, and automatically refund those fees whenever it detects that. So that's a really cool and exciting one because it's getting to impact customers. And typically that process could have taken several days when a human was doing it because it is so tedious. But with a bot doing it, it's just a matter of a couple minutes.
Yeah, as Bill said, great example. You know, that starts to bridge a little bit, and this isn't intended to be a question that you have to answer necessarily, but don't you think that we're kind of crossing into when there's code written like that detects stuff? Maybe that's not full artificial intelligence or AI, but this leads to that kind of thing, right? Noticing patterns or finding things that somebody didn't have to look for and didn't require a phone call from a customer, right? Hey, what's this doggone fee here, right? That shouldn't have happened. You're catching it prior, so it's preventative. It's ahead of time. It's predictive in some ways to see that a problem had occurred. Do you see that evolving even more?
Yeah, and some of that's a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but you are starting to see that more. And even if it isn't AI exactly, from the outside user looking in, maybe it looks that way. It's like, oh wow, that was already refunded. That was just a couple minutes. You may get the impression that wow, there's a really smart artificial intelligence behind that. In this case, it's a pretty, not necessarily simple, but it's a pretty straightforward automation. But I mean, one of my coworkers is working on this invoice processing bot that you can imagine a large company, the amount of invoices going in and out, and the amount of manpower to process things like that. We're working on bots that can detect invoice numbers in these documents that are just like mailed to us and stuff. So there's a lot of cool technology that's kind of being explored there as well.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Any other questions from our audience? If not, why we're going to give you a little bit of your time back. But Chris, you know, personally, I could sit here and talk to you all day about this stuff, and I've really enjoyed the dialogue. You're very articulate. You've really given us the things that I think a lot of people will like. Here is another question just came in. It says, which programming languages specifically do you need to know for RPA?
Yeah, so there are, unfortunately, the answer may not be super satisfying. It depends. For what we use, Visual Basic or .NET library of and kind of family of languages is really useful. So Visual Basic, C#, that's primarily what we use. PowerShell is extremely beneficial, even if you're not doing RPA, but it can automate so many different things. And then I'm sure other platforms outside of UiPath have specific languages they use, but languages like PowerShell and Python are extremely flexible to do a lot of different stuff. So those I would recommend checking out.
Have you enjoyed, with not having a computer science background, picking up those skills, you know, in terms of exposure, like you said, computer science 101, but you know, really the fact that those languages written in certain ways are more beneficial for certain activities than others? I mean, has that been interesting to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm still learning so much. It's one of those things, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything. So I'm still kind of in that phase where I feel like I still don't know anything, but with programming languages, there are so many different ones, and that can be overwhelming with what should I use? What do I do best? Or what would be best for this certain task? Most of them can probably do whatever you're trying to do at some basic level. So a lot of times it's more so important to learn kind of the logic behind how computers work and how you do stuff with programming languages in general. And then after that, most languages are pretty easy to pick up. They have all their little nuances, but it's not too big of a task to pick up a new one.
Yeah, here's another one. So we're rolling now. Let's see. It says, is a lot of the automation done with code blocks that are already created? Or do you program the automation for the most part? And what % would be code blocks that you just drag and drop?
So the way UiPath works, and this is just one RPA tool, I'm assuming most are about this way. I haven't used really any others. The way this one works is, say you were wanting it to click on something, you would literally drag the click activity into the code, and then you have to specify what they call a selector. So and that's where it gets a little bit more into code. So you point where you want it to click, it'll automatically pull that selector, the code that's behind that button. And then you can go in there and manipulate it. So that's a lot of what we do, is manipulating those selectors to make sure it's pointing at the right button, because you can imagine the difficulties if it clicks on the wrong button. So especially when you're dealing with bank processes. So there's a lot of kind of code that goes into that in a way. We're dragging and dropping most stuff. Occasionally there'll be functionality UiPath doesn't have that we'll have to do, like with something like PowerShell or Visual Basic Code. But most of it is handled by drag and drop activities.
That was a good answer. A great question. I really appreciate that some of the folks in the audience are coming up with a level of depth that we never know whether we should ask those kinds of things. But here's another one. This is pretty fun question. What's been your favorite day on the job so far? That may be hard, but.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit on this one. There's multiple days. Really, anytime you get to see one of your, not necessarily one of your automations go live, but definitely that, when you see them go live and working properly, and you see the impact that they can make, that's always extremely rewarding, to know that you created that from scratch, and that that a certain team isn't having to go into overtime now because they had an overwhelming amount of volume on a certain task. So stuff like that's extremely rewarding. For toughest, as with any software, you're going to have bugs in the code. So you always have your kind of problematic ones that keep you up at night and thinking, oh, maybe this will work for that. And so days like that are really tough when you have a lot of bugs come through, or a bug that's really difficult. That can also be rewarding once you figure it out, but that's typically going to be the tough days.
Yeah, you're right, though. I remember the days where you develop stuff, it goes through tests, you're in development, and then it goes live. It's in production.
Yep.
Woo-hoo, and it works. Yeah. There's some level of satisfaction. Of course, we always said you can only celebrate for a nanosecond, and then you move on.
Yep. Like, all right, what's the next one?
Yeah. But no, this has been great. Again, these questions have been very good. We appreciate our audience for offering them up. If we have any others, we'll give it a few more, another minute or so. But Chris, I'll reemphasize, I hope you've had fun with this, because you're helping us carry on the legacy of apprenticeship, because every time we get a day in the life or a testimony, we do like to share this around, because we've been able to make a real dent in this in Arkansas. We've got, I think we're doing more IT apprenticeships than any other state in the country, and you're a part of that. And Arvest is a part of that. So we thank you for that. And we just want to continue this growth. And, there's a lot of opportunity out there. So any final words, Chris?
I don't think so. Yes, some awesome questions. We got some awesome questions from the chat. So I feel like I've gotten to say what I wanted to say. So I just appreciate you having me.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks, audience, for appearing today and being with us. And thanks to the ACDS team, which includes all of our talent team, our project managers, Lisa in client development, and especially Bill Yoder, our executive director. So thanks to everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.